welcome back to Faith on Film, where we read your church library and search the good stuff. I'm Stephanie. Nathan!
Remember how you made me watch Lay It Down?
Yeah.
Well, this is my revenge. Shut up! This is Pastor Greg. Nope. Sit. Stay. Pastor Greg was a Christian sitcom written, produced, directed by, and starring Greg Robbins. Who's Greg Robbins? Well, he is the star of The Terminator and Reanimator. Right there.
Oh.
I may have used the term star loosely. Greg stars as Greg, a relatively new convert to Christianity who is doing his first pastoring job.
There's some potential here for comedy. After all, a first-time pastor, and small churches can attract needy people, and needy people can bring baggage, and it can be kind of funny, I suppose.
Yeah, this show isn't that.
But why? You can do all kinds of fun little things about board meetings, arguing over every minute detail.
This show does literally none of that. This show wants you to know that its very existence is proof God has a sense of humor.
No. Literally nobody puts their tagline at the end credits of every episode.
But what saith Scripture?
Nothing about putting your pretentious tagline at the end of every episode. I'm going off of the assumption that humor the way God intended is good, clean, wholesome family fun. Okay, I could get behind this. After all, a lot of comedy can be very raunchy and can be shocking for the sake of shocking and not necessarily something you can always share with your kids.
He was surprised.
Here's the thing, though. We've already had clean, wholesome sitcoms. Take, for example, Full House. I'll be the first to admit this show has not aged very well, but it fills that niche of something you can watch with your kids without worrying they'll pick up something bad from it. It's cornball to high heaven, but it's cornball with a sense of personality. Pastor Greg, on the other hand,
That's not a good sound.
is utter trash.
What do we got here?
Well, there's Greg. He's a jackass.
Language!
I can say that swear anytime I want because it's in the Bible.
Fine.
If you prefer, he's a man-child.
Well, this could work. After all, he's a new convert to Christianity. It's his first church. The opening says that he was a womanizer and a drinker in his previous life. So, this could work with some good character development.
Too bad that's not what happens.
Because, of course, it isn't.
The characters in the show talk about Greg like he's this sagely pastor that they're just so blessed to have. There's a real narrative disconnect here where the Greg we see is not the Greg they experience. And when he does offer advice, it's just generic platitudes.
Goody.
He's like a less tasty fortune cookie.
That's saying something. Fortune cookies are gross.
I like fortune cookies. Lots of fiction is based around characters like that. Even comedies. A good example is Seinfeld. All of the main cast are some degree of horrible people. But the show knows this.
There's this one episode where he continues to procrastinate visiting somebody in the hospital because he keeps finding other things to do, such as helping this complete stranger de-stress with a day at the spa. Hospital visit! And then, ironically enough, later in the show, he makes fun of a parishioner for wanting to go to a spa because spas are for girls. Real mature. He'll also regularly tease and make fun of his youth minister Flo for no discernible reason. Tell that Flo is genuinely hurt by his pastor's taunting. Why is this pastor supposedly so cool again? He lacks any sense of basic empathy. That is not cool.
It's also strange that we rarely see him doing actual pastoral work. Like, stuff happens at the church, but the fact that it's at the church and he's the pastor doesn't come up very often. Which is baffling because that's what should give this show its sense of identity.
Wouldn't that be like if I Love Lucy only did the housewife jokes and didn't do anything with the show business? The main thing you think about when you think of I Love Lucy is Lucy's constant attempts to get into show business with her husband Ricky and all the comedic potential this sets up, and not to mention all the guest stars you can fly in. I got the very distinct impression that in the Andy Griffith Show, the king of the clean sitcom, was the kind of show that Pastor Greg wanted to be and genuinely thought it was. But here's the thing. The Andy Griffith Show worked to make Andy Griffith's character, Andy Taylor, one of the most empathetic characters in TV. Sure, there are a lot of episodes about his home life and his relationship with his son, but there's a lot more to being a sheriff than just hauling away a bad guy every now and again. And the show was very aware of this, with episodes like the time he convinced a runaway boy that he had to go home, or the time he had to arrest a guy on Christmas Eve, so he set up the Christmas Eve party at the jailhouse so he could still spend Christmas with his family, or the time he bent over backwards to try to get a poor family out of a foreclosure notice with every loophole he could find. That is taking care of your people. Any minister worth his salt knows that. There's visiting your shut-ins. There's going to hospital visits. There's doing funerals and weddings. There's counseling. There's setting up the next meeting. There's making sure your church is involved in your community. Basically, nobody ministers part-time. But no, we're not doing that either.
For a more direct comparison, look at a show like Father Ted. They actually mind the comic potential about somebody in the clergy. And they make jokes about it somewhat regularly. And yeah, when Ted wasn't a particularly nice guy, which was actually pretty often, the show was aware of that and made him the butt of the joke for it. But Laurie's the butt of the joke.
That's right. It really is amazing how mean the other characters can be to her sometimes for no discernible reason. Like, there's that time when she revealed that she was afraid of flying, and Greg's solution to this is to put her on the roof of the church and not let her leave until she gets over it.
Bob Newhart called. That's not how phobias work. There's also a scene where she's pouring her heart out to her alleged friends about a personal problem she's dealt with for years, and they goof off and don't listen to her.
I hate that.
Greg, you're a douche.
By the way, are Greg and Laurie supposed to have a will they or won't they thing going on?
Oh, absolutely they are.
Because of course.
Look, guys, I know Friends did this and it got big with it. But you don't have to do what they did. You don't have to take something that was popular a decade ago and be the watered-down version of it now. You don't have to be the newsboys of sitcoms.
You know, he's only been at this church for a couple of months, and he's flirting with a parishioner already.
Maybe not a great idea? You'd think Frank would dissuade him from this.
Who's Frank?
He's the church custodian / handyman.
Okay.
And the town mayor.
Does that ever come up in the show?
Oh, no. No, you don't even realize he is the mayor until late in the first season.
Why would he be talking to Greg about what's appropriate?
Frank is the one who regularly offers him advice.
Oh, sort of a who pastors the pastor sort of a thing. I can get behind this.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Let me guess. Everybody goes to Frank for advice instead of Greg.
Well, yes, he's the only character offering any useful input.
So, why isn't he the pastor? If you've seen Boy Meets World, then you probably remember the character Mr. Feeney. He was a teacher who went above and beyond the call of duty and acted as a mentor to all the kids and also the parents on occasion. However, Mr. Feeney didn't do Alan Matthews' job for him. He knew his place, but he would step aside and defer the kids to their parents. He would even tell the parents sometimes that this is not my place, you have to figure this out. This is what Frank needs to be doing. Sure, he can offer advice on occasion, but at some point he's got to say to Greg, you've got to step up. These are your people. I'm just here in the background.
Then there's the youth minister Flo. He's the other butt monkey.
Why?
Because he's the second least obnoxious character? There's no real reason. They just mock him and mistreat him all the time. Ironically, we see Flo acting pastorally more often than Greg does.
Does everybody in this church do Pastor Greg's job better than he does?
Flo's not without his faults. He also maintains a rivalry with another youth pastor in town. He's the cool one that all the teenagers want to hang around with.
Who knew youth ministry was such a competition?
It's strange, because youth groups aren't chained to the church they may be most associated with. It's not uncommon for more than one church in a given area to co-youth group. Just do that.
There's a little bit of an attempt at character growth where Flo's concerned. They give him a girlfriend.
Oh, which is a big deal because he hasn't dated in a while.
That's right.
Too bad she disappears after a single episode.
Because of course she does.
It's not like the date ended badly. She was rather charmed by him. She just stopped showing up.
And his character growth was derailed again when he was offered an opportunity to be a pastor at another church in his own right, head pastor. And he decides to turn it down because the people at Merlin Church are his family.
No.
Even though they've been jerks to him the whole time.
Key example, John.
John.
John is the church treasurer, which means he's constantly worrying about going over budget. But they decided to take that aspect as his key character trait. So he's constantly freaking out about everything.
We really hate this character. This is possibly the most obnoxious character in the whole show, which is saying something. Anyway.
It's not like we can even appreciate how annoying he is to the other characters. A, because we're more annoyed by him than they are. And B, they're also terrible people.
You know, John is a perfect example of a really odd thing about the way people in the show are written. All of the adults act like teenagers, all the teenagers act like children, and all the children act like 2-year-olds. It's really bizarre.
One of those teenagers, by the way, is John's daughter.
He has a wife? That poor woman.
Well, during the first season, he's pregnant. You'd think that would come up more often than it does. But really, the only time it's relevant is when the writers decided it would be funny to have John repeatedly step on people's fingers at a Lamaze class.
Okay, being a church treasurer is not a full-time job.
Oh, but he's also the worship associate.
That's still not a full-time job. The things you do with your church really are volunteer things you do on the side.
He wasn't as obnoxious in the unaired version of the pilot, which means that somebody at some point made a conscious decision to turn up his high-pitched squealing about things.
I understand that it is a staple of basically every sitcom ever to have the sitcom idiot. That one character who will say or do the things that are crazy, either because they just don't care or they're really not that bright. Just having somebody running around and screaming at the top of their lungs isn't funny. This actor, Jim Young, has neither the physical skill of Don Knotts nor the charisma of Will Friedle. He's just obnoxious.
Then there's Kat. While not a starring role, she is an important one. She shows up and starts chucking hymnals at Flo, demanding to see Pastor Greg. Greg intervenes, and then they spend the rest of the episode wondering what to do with this strange teenager who showed up. At the end of that episode, Kat reveals that before her mother died, she said that...
You're my father.
Dun, dun, dun! No, but seriously, I am a little surprised that this show actually went there. It also helps that the actress playing Kat, Lisa Honeck, is the best performer that they got on this entire series. She's a non-Christian seeing the weird culture and people that her father has chosen to surround himself with. And that opens up a lot more potential for comedy and for story. I wanted the show to be restructured around her, but it wasn't.
We liked Kat. Unfortunately, we can't really say the same thing about the rest of the congregants because, well, frankly, I don't really remember any of the other congregants. Not to drag Bob Newhart back into this, but the show knew that the patients who came in had to be part of the fabric of the series, in addition to the co-workers and the neighbors. Thus, you had characters like Mr. Carlin, Mrs. Bakerman, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Vickers. Pastor Greg's parishioners are just interchangeable faces. They'll appear for an episode and do something, only to completely disappear for a while. You don't really remember them by name, much less what their distinguishing character trait might have been.
It's not like the writers remember the characters either.
True. Seriously, your congregants should be where the humor comes from. Say, Nathan, I think it's time we get into some specifics about individual episodes. You know, just to give the folks at home an idea of what this show really is like on an episode-by-episode basis.
Alright, so there's the pilot. Greg comes into town after some backstory, but his car breaks down, and so he has to walk the rest of the way to church. Along the way, his clothes get dirty. They confuse him for a homeless man seeking help. Meanwhile, the church has accidentally double-booked a funeral in one wing and a wedding in another.
It really is strange how many people hang around this church on a day-to-day basis when it's almost never Sunday.
You can't even claim that they're here for either ceremony because most of these characters explicitly aren't. Look, I get you want to have people for your cast to interact with, but just show more of Sunday mornings in that case. This is strange. Flo is unable to do both services at the same time because that's humanly impossible. So Greg volunteers to do the funeral. And Flo still thinks that he's a random homeless man? Sure, whatever. It all gets sorted out, and you'd think that would be the end of the episode, but no, we start a completely new story where Greg is nervous about doing his first pastoring job, and some of his parishioners want him to fail because he's so new.
Why?
It's also not built into the first half of the episode, so it feels like we started a new episode for the last 10 minutes. Anyway, Greg gets a pep talk from Frank and goes up to deliver his very first sermon. And the credits start rolling while he's talking.
Oh, so I don't have to pay attention. Great!
Imagine if the credits started rolling while Luke was gearing up to fire his missiles at the Death Star. This show lacks any basic sense of plot structure. And you know, that can work. Plenty of comedies are just slice of life, nothing in particular happens. Let's look at Seinfeld again.
Stop making me think of things I'd rather be watching.
That show literally billed itself as a show about nothing. Their breakout episode is nothing but waiting in a Chinese restaurant for a table. In order for that to work, you have to have characters your audience enjoys seeing. Pastor Greg doesn't have that.
Don't get me started on their stupid scene transitions. Sometimes it's the church building, sometimes it's a stained glass window, and theme music plays. Okay, that's fine. But with the lyrics? Why do the people sing, "It's a new day," every time you change scenes? That's really grating. Stop it! Nathan?
I got bored. You can't fight in the war room. Classic.
Nathan, get back here!
Okay. Then there's the Christmas episode. Yeah.
Okay, how bad is it gonna be?
Greg is worried about delivering his first Christmas Eve service, so a random homeless man appears and quotes a Bible verse to him and then mysteriously disappears.
Oh, goody. We're doing the secretly an angel in disguise. How Christmas cliche can we get? He's gonna find a pregnant woman, isn't he?
I could say no, but I'd be lying.
Why do I ask questions?
So, Greg wins an opportunity to shop through Kmart for 10 minutes and get anything he can grab for free. He uses this opportunity to get a bunch of gifts for some orphans.
That's nice.
And he trashes Kmart in the process.
That's really rude. You know the staff is going to have to clean that up afterwards. Why do you have to be such a jerk to the customer service people?
Kmart, the gang gets stuck in an elevator with the aforementioned pregnant woman. So Greg has to call Flo and tell them they won't be able to make it, and Flo then gets nervous that he'll have to deliver the sermon on short notice.
Why don't they also call 911 while they're at it?
Greg and Frank help deliver the baby while Lori tries to keep the mother calm. Greg remembers the Bible verse that the angel told him, and delivers what the writers think is this incredibly moving speech about how life is precious and how God wants her and her baby back.
Oh, we should probably mention that because we have to cover all of our basic cliches that Christian audiences want to see, the woman confesses that she was thinking about having an abortion but changed her mind at the last minute when a voice told her to. Then we cut over to the church, and it turns out that Flo has been broadcasting this phone conversation to the entire congregation as the Christmas Eve sermon. So a bunch of strangers were listening in on her life story and her giving birth in what she thought was a private conversation.
But wait, there's more!
How?
This was another episode that they shot before the series was picked up. Which means they wrote, shot, and edited this episode twice without realizing how messed up it is.
It feels so uncomfortable.
But wait! There's more!
Uh-oh.
Greg Robbins' son, Gregory P. Robbins, is headlining a reboot of the show with this episode as their pilot. So they've done it 3 times now. Then there's the episode where Frank goes on a date.
Uh-oh.
Which is a big deal because he also hasn't dated in a while. The rest of the cast decides that they need to eavesdrop on the date and feed him advice through headsets. Again, you're just stealing jokes from other shows.
Oh, like the B plot where Greg and Lori both make a bet where she has to do something spontaneous and he can't eat pizza, which apparently he's suddenly addicted to. You know, Lori, I would have had Greg stick to his schedule, but that's just me.
The gang show up to the restaurant in elaborate costumes and just make fools of themselves. Greg starts hallucinating pizza, and Lori, in an attempt to be spontaneous, just starts spilling water on the table. You know the staff's gonna have to clean that up, right?
Yeah, this is his version of being spontaneous. Break things for other people to clean up.
John pretends to be their server and puts on a real bad accent that doesn't even match the restaurant they're in. And naturally, he gets kicked out. Gee, who could have seen that coming? After a while, Frank tells his date what's really been going on, and rather than condemning them as the horrible busybodies that they actually are, she finds the whole thing simply charming, and everybody gets off scot-free.
And she is also never seen again. Then there's another episode where Greg sees the homeless man, Angel.
No, you goofs. He's Rosencrantz and he's Guildenstern. Or was it?
Ain't that
Coming. But this time, Lori is convinced that Greg is losing touch with reality.
So she has him go to a therapy group that is meeting in their church every week, which Greg somehow didn't know about. Okay, seriously, you're the senior pastor. Shouldn't you know about what goes on in your own church?
Greg has a really low opinion of the therapist. In the Venn diagram of a therapist and a pastor, talking through people's issues with them is right smack dab in the middle. But no, I guess therapy is just for really insane people.
The people in the therapy group are the butt of the joke. And that's really unfortunate. There's this one lady with severe anxiety, so severe that she hides under a table. There's this guy that just stares blankly at Greg the whole time. There's this... I feel like humor the way God intended it would be above this kind of joke.
Lori just kind of forgets that she thought Greg was going crazy. And we all move on with our lives. Again, we come to the episode where a married couple goes to Greg for counseling and admits that they're considering divorce.
And apparently, humor the way God intended is to just speed up the arguing, so they're arguing in chipmunk voices, instead of, actually taking the time to give whatever broke in this marriage some actual foundation or some structure. But at least we're finally seeing Greg do some actual pastoring?
Sort of, kind of, but not really. Because their arguments have nothing of substance, Greg has nothing of substance to work with. So he just finds a lot of alternate ways to say, well, you guys should stay together because it's what God wants. I swear, this couple would get more improvement in their relationship from watching Fireproof than they would talking to this guy.
Wow, shots fired. And then we see Greg deliver a sermon about love. And judging by the reaction shot, I kind of thought that his sermon was magically working. But no, they get a call. Greg gets a call later that the couple is at the courthouse getting their divorce.
They pick up the pen to sign, and then they both spontaneously change their minds and say they don't want to get a divorce. They come back outside to find that Greg and Lori are leading a prayer circle in front of the door, and it changed their minds. Huh. Good work, show. You finally made me laugh.
No, Nathan, that was supposed to be serious.
What? But it's so stupid. Are you telling me that prayer can just alter a person's mindset without them even knowing it's happening?
And what's funny, too, is the couple doesn't really interact with the people whose prayers saved their marriage. They just kind of stand there, arm in arm, and just look at everybody who's praying for them, who just look at them back.
And then that's the end.
Oh, yay. For me.
Of Season 1! Steph?
Andy Griffith, I need you!
God has a great sense of humor. Look at ostriches.
Well, Kat reveals at the end of that episode that before her mother died, she revealed that Greg was Kat's daughter.